AKA Fireside Chat. I want to give a thank you, shout out to Florida State University for sponsoring this session. Is Florida State representing the room? I believe Dean Andrews. Thanks for making this possible. I hope we make it worth your investment. Let us know. So this has become a tradition to host a Fireside Chat that reflects on the theme of the conference. And the theme of this conference, as you know, is addressing social justice and equity imperatives, exemplars of inclusive excellence. We're going to talk for an hour or so and provide a little bit of time for questions at the end. My panelists have approved me to say that they welcome tough, challenging questions. So this is a difficult issue, an important issue to grapple with its complexity. So please, bring the questions at the end of the conversation we have here today. I have two excellent panelists, Dr. Brian Cole, Professor of Health Promotion and Physical Education at Kennesaw State University. We'll give him a shout out. And Dr. Nicole Keith, Executive Associate Dean and Professor of Kinesiology with the Indiana School of Public Health, Bloomington. So, given the theme of the conference, I want to ask both of you if you can briefly elaborate on your experience and share what you have hoped to add to the conversation on social justice and equity in kinesiology. And I'll start with you, Dr. Keith, if you don't mind. Just slide that.
Okay. All right, I got it. So, when I was in high school, and I'm not going to give you my life story, but when I was in high school, I didn't know kinesiology was a thing. And what I knew is that I grew up in a really active family. And I grew up in Michigan, and my parents' family was in Chicago, downtown. Some of them lived in projects, some of them just lived in really rough neighborhoods, and my cousins couldn't be active the way I was. And as we grew older, I saw myself being healthy and them not being so healthy, and I didn't understand why that was. And then when I got to college, I realized there was something called kinesiology. And I said, oh, this is why I'm healthier than my family members. And I said, there are not enough people. And then as I went through school, I learned about this topic called health disparities. And I understood it had a name. And I understood that there needed to be more people who were in our profession like us, who had an experience where we could say, this is the problem, let's find an answer. And so I have worked really hard for many years to make sure that more and more people either who have had the experience, who care about the experience, which is everybody in this room, because you clearly would not be here right now at the end of a very long day if you didn't care about it. To say in kinesiology, we could really make a difference in health outcomes if we care. And we understand that there are a lot of people in our world who don't understand if we just move more, we'll be healthier. And so this is what diversity in kinesiology means to me, because we have to offer the opportunity. It's free. We can walk, it doesn't cost money to walk. We don't have to buy special shoes or special clothes. Movement is free. We can do it in our homes. If we don't have a home, we can still do it. Movement is free. And this is a way that we can all live a really long time for very little cost and improve everybody's health outcomes. And so we need more and more people to send that message and do this thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Cole.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'd probably say my experiences was very similar to Dr. Keith's here in that I think the biggest thing that I looked at growing up was deficit. And deficit in terms of looking at my neighborhood, and then let me give a little bit of backstory here. So I was involved a lot in Scout. I obviously, back in the time, I showed you pictures of like what I was looking like as a teenager. I wasn't really playing like football or basketball or anything like that. In fact, I was on the bench for my church's basketball league, which is about as lowest as you can possibly get. But anyway, we worked through that with our therapist. So what I remember is we would always go up north of Atlanta, to camp and to participate in some recreation. And the facilities were just so much better than what we grew up around. And that really sort of stuck with me throughout my teen years. And then when I ended up going to the University of Georgia, I decided to major in health and physical education. Didn't really think anything of it. 4 years later, I'm finishing up, did a master's in sport management. A few years later after that, one of my mentors there said, hey, I think it'd be good to come back and work on your doctorate in like health and PE. And again, these were all things that I had no conception of at that particular time. So for me, when I got to my doctoral program, it was, okay, how can I use this particular experience that I'm in to help other people? First of all, to recognize disparities. I think second of all, to get resources in areas that maybe not necessarily have them. And then I think finally, it's to sort of change the narrative in terms of how we look at, as Nicole was kind of mentioned here, health disparities. I'm a physical educator. I don't shy away from that. And I'm a little bit biased in thinking that I think physical education is sort of a microcosm of society. I think it's more of a microcosm than we sort of think. I think we sort of gloss a little bit those things over, particularly when we talk about who has access to space. And we'll probably elaborate on that as we kind of move on here. But yeah, that's why I kind of do what I do. So thanks for the question.
Can I just, because I have to.
Of course.
So Brian and I are really good old friends. And I just want to tell a story that's kind of like what he's talking about. We had a faculty candidate come in and interview for a different school, not ours. So Brian and I used to be colleagues. And I was like, oh, we're gonna have a presentation, you should come listen. And she said, I grew up in Georgia. I know you. Didn't you used to ride the colored people bus? And I was like, the what? And she was like, we had to say, Brian, I think you need to tell that story.
Yeah.
There was a bus for colored students.
So yeah, I mean, long story short, colored, if you're from my part of the world in the South, I mean, that's, basically Black kids, Latino kids, right? So we essentially bused from our lower resource school to schools that had better resources. In fact, the bus situation was a situation where we'd wake up at 5:30 in the morning, get the bus at about 6:15 in the morning, and then go to a hub where there were other buses. You end up switching to the bus that's going to take you to your particular school. It's about an hour, for us it was about an hour out of the way at a high school called Tucker High School. And you go to school out there, and then you would bus all the way back, and it would be the exact same thing. But it was a specific bus that was for the Black and Latino children. And that's why we called it the colored bus. And there's a lot of different other sociological dynamics that went along with that. But that's essentially the story. So that just kind of shows you, I mean, our parents at that particular time were making a choice to send us to better resource schools. And since that time, we don't have like separate buses anymore in the state of Georgia, but in some states, such as Massachusetts, they've had that for years. And some of you who are a little bit older here can probably appreciate that and tell some stories about that. But yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's such an interesting story I'd never heard as well. And I think you mentioned the buses aren't segregated anymore, and I guess that's due in part to shifting policy context, right? And I want to ask a couple questions about that. Since 2020, kinesiology departments, organizations such as this one have emphasized social justice and diversity at unprecedented levels. After a few years of rapid change and emphasis on diversity, what is your perspective on the success or shortcomings of the movement toward inclusive excellence?
Oh, my turn now. Oh, wow. There's so many different things I could start with the perspective. I'm going to start with 2020 because that is what is the most freshest to me in terms of, to be quite honest with you, having more opportunities to talk about these different types of things. As we know, in 2020, there was a lot going on. One of the big things was George Floyd and some of the other things that were going on in terms of what people would consider civil unrest. I would probably term it as things that have been going on for a while that people finally started paying attention to in a different way. So we started seeing organizations, at least I have, taking more of an intentional focus on these types of issues related to equity, diversity, and inclusion. I would probably suggest that we had a period of probably about 2.5 years where we were really gung-ho. And that's not an indictment on this organization. I'm talking about just generally that some of the perceptions where everybody was really about let's hire people, let's make sure we have campuses that are safe, let's make sure neighborhoods are safe, let's pay attention to these particular things. And now you're seeing the rollback. You're seeing the rollback in terms of legislation. You're seeing the rollback in terms of jobs. You're in my state, in the state of Georgia, the rollback in terms of what you can say on job interviews, and even things such as how we look at funding and funding particular pieces. So I'll start there, because I think that's a lot to sort of unpack, and we really probably need to talk about that. So, yeah, you think you want to add?
I do. So in 2020, we were all at home, and I have a son. Those of you who know me, my son is a wrestler. He had to keep working out. And thank you, Dr. Bahamande and Urtala. We still had access to the strength and conditioning lab because there's no place to work out. So we worked out every day. My son is much bigger than I am and much stronger than I am, and I needed somebody to spot him. So I enlisted a graduate student to come and work out with us. He was happy to do so because there was no place for him to work out either, and he wanted to stay in shape. He's a white guy from Indiana, lived on the south side of Indianapolis. Didn't have a lot of friends, family members. Everybody in his life growing up was white. And it was 2020. And he asked me if he should talk about what's going on in the world. And I said, that's totally up to you. And he said, as a white man, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to do this. I've never had to think about or deal with this ever. But he spends time with my son and me every day for months, and he knows something's wrong in America. And he's a kinesiology student, really smart, really talented, you know, white guy, studying something very unrelated to what I do. And I said to him, you know, when I joined, at the time I was at IUPUI, and I said, when I joined IUPUI, they had to recarpet and repaint my office because the person who was in my office before me smoked. And I said, if we walked down the hallway today and somebody was smoking a cigarette in the hallway, we would all feel really comfortable saying, you shouldn't smoke. If you don't care about your own health, that's okay, it's up to you. You can do what you want in the privacy of your own home or your own personal space. But if you smoke in this hallway, you're harming the health of your colleagues and the students who are attending this university. We would never accept someone smoking. I hope to see racism being treated the same way. If you see someone being a racist, if you see someone who is fueling health disparities, if you see someone who's treating someone differently, you can step in, and it should be as socially unacceptable as smoking. And so if you feel comfortable saying, hey, you shouldn't smoke in the hallway, you should feel comfortable saying, hey, you shouldn't be a racist in the hallway. And you can do that. And he was like, oh, and I said, you don't have to be proactive. If you're not comfortable being proactive, you don't have to be proactive. You can be reactive. You'll see it every day. Pay attention and protect people who don't have a voice and who don't feel like they can protect themselves. And I said that to him. I know it meant something you know, I haven't witnessed whether he's done it or not. It doesn't matter, he heard me. I know he'll do it. I have complete faith in him. And it's kind of like 2020 was a turning point for people to say, what can I do? And I really feel like it's hard. And as I listen throughout the day to day, like, we weren't taught how to do this. We were taught how to be physically active. We were taught how to help people be physically active. We were taught about how to help people be healthy. This is something we were never taught about. It's something that we've all experienced, and that we've chosen to study outside of our discipline. But there are really simple things everybody can do, whether you decide to study it or not, to help people make this world a more equitable and healthier place.
Thank you for sharing an example where we all can participate in this. And 2020 led to this movement where we're talking about diversity here at our universities, other organizations. It also brought about these policy changes. And I want to refer back to the Leadership Forum. Provost Shoho talked about this, and he said, if you're at one of these states, I think it was about a quarter of us, raised our hand and said, our state has banned DEI, or the offices of DEI, etc. And what he said that I thought was really kind of a profound statement was, this is your opportunity for leadership. You should be optimistic about this and step up to the challenge and figure out new ways to advance this issue of diversity. And so that's something I'll continue to reflect on. But what it also kind of drew upon was the notion that we are all on the same page in regards to equity, diversity, and inclusion, in that there are not people in leadership roles who might not agree with those policies that would silence diversity initiatives. So my question is, to what extent are we on the same boat? And if we're not, what are the implications for advancing this discussion and being inclusive in that conversation for everyone who might want to participate?
I'll go first. So, we are not all on the same page. And I do live in the state of Indiana, and at Indiana University, we're encouraged to continue our DEI initiatives. But just randomly, for a different reason, it had nothing to do with this conference, I Googled DEI Indiana. And we are in trouble in the state of Indiana. There are people, because you can see what people are searching and what they want to know. And there are people looking. They're looking for our president, they're looking for our provost, they're looking for leaders, they're looking for policymakers who are in support of DEI because they don't want it. It's threatening to them, or it's unconstitutional, or whatever. People who don't agree with equality, equity, inclusion, diversity, they don't like those words, and they want it to go away. And we are in trouble if we don't keep talking about it, keep speaking out about it, keep voting. Please vote. But everybody has a voice. And how hypocritical are we if we don't listen to everybody's voice? And so when I did that Google, I was looking for something else. And I think younger Nicole Keith would have said, I don't want to see that, that's scary. Older Nicole Keith was like, oh, what are they talking about? What do they think? This is really interesting. And they do not want me to be the executive associate dean at the School of Public Health Bloomington. A woman should not have this job. A Black woman certainly shouldn't have this job, and nobody under the age of 60 should have this job. And so, we got racism, ageism, sexism, it's all happening, and that's okay, because everybody has a right to their opinion. Everybody does, and we should hear what they have to say. How are we going to have a conversation with people who disagree if we can't have a conversation with people who disagree. And so I did a lot of reading. It's scary. They don't like me, and they don't even know me, but they don't like what I represent. And I'm a threat to them. And I'm a threat to them because they believe I won't include them. And that's so not true. It's so not true. Everybody should have a place. And like, so does it get better if we move out all the white men? Nope, that doesn't make it better. Just like it wouldn't get better if they moved out all the black men, or all the black women, or all the Hispanic men or women, or all the Native men or women. Like, we all have to be here. We all have to be here. I'm not trying to move anybody out, but that is the belief. When we agree and when we embrace DEI, we're trying to move out everybody white, and we're not. Like, that's not the deal. And that's what I learned on my Google search. And so I have to now be sensitive that the people who have had all the power all my life now feel really vulnerable, and I have to make them also feel safe, which is so weird, but so necessary. And
Thank you. Brian, I know you're from one of the states that was discussed. What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I would agree. We're not on the same page at all. And, you know, I obviously lived in Indiana for 9 years, so, you know, I have that particular perspective of it as well. DEI as a term and as an ideology has turned into let's ban the black movement. So I'm glad you started with that first. And some people may get upset with me that I've thrown that out there like that, but when you look at diversity, equity, inclusion, you look at social justice, you look at book bans, it is primarily focused on eliminating this idea of a powerful black. And I just want everybody to, when they leave here today, do a Google search and try to figure this out, because we're seeing this thing, again, regardless of how you felt about what happened at Harvard. We just had a prominent woman who was, I believe, a vice chancellor, vice president, commit suicide as well because of bullying. I mean, these are things that are happening in the news on a pretty consistent basis, and people are turning a blind eye to this. So when we talk about like how to get people on the same page, I always think about power and who has power. And untenured faculty members, and I'm very sensitive to this because I work with a lot of untenured faculty members who are trying to get obviously tenured, they're not getting this information from their PhD programs. If they're lucky, they're getting it from their mentor. Even if they're getting it from their mentor is trying to say, here are the types of things that you need to do as a person of color to be safe, which is insane that we're talking to people about how to be safe in a higher education situation that was supposed to be free for everybody. So that's something else I typically think about when I think about these ideas related to power. Legislation, you know, that's a big thing in Georgia. Yeah, we can't say EDI anymore. We can't say diversity. Some of you may know that myself and Dr. Tara Blackshear, if you're in the physical education space, we did a book called Critical Race Studies in Physical Education. And Human Connects was like, are you sure you want to have this particular title? And this was in 2020, 2021 when we were first going through this, and we had already had the title set up before people started moving the goalposts around here. So it really wouldn't matter what we term things, is that these things have turned into codes for let's eliminate some people from the conversation. I'm even seeing things from administrators, and it's something I saw 2 weeks ago, and administrators have to be smarter about this and know better. Someone wrote an email to faculty, staff, and a few selected students. It's about 400 people, and the quote that they used was a quote from Henry Ford. Now, some of you in the audience may be saying to yourself, well, why is that such a big deal? Henry Ford, blah, 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 is, mechanism. But most people don't recognize the fact that Henry Ford was anti-Semite, okay? Raging anti-Semite. Raging eugenics, a person in charge of that. And it just speaks to the point that even people in leadership positions have to do a better job of reading outside of their content so that they don't put people into situations where they are in constant fear. And I'll leave with this too, because again, I think we'll touch on this a little bit later. I do a lot of work in this particular space, and I've even noticed little things about how my work is presented by the university now. So we went from a situation where 2 years ago, everything that I did used to go on the website, or it used to be publicized a little bit further, and we're noticing with faculty who do work in social justice, who do work in EDI, that's not happening. In fact, situations where whole websites are being redesigned in order for certain things not to filter through to the public because of the fear that people have from legislators and state associations.
Well, and as this policy context shifts, we've got major challenges that we're going to have to figure out because we have two major demographic changes reshaping higher education. The first that I'll refer to is a demographic cliff, where fewer students are graduating from high schools and enrolling in college. The second is an increasingly diverse student population, which will soon be 50% or more persons from minority groups. It seems that these shifts in demographics require kinesiology departments to consider how our programs can remain relevant and competitive to these changing dynamics, in addition to the diversity issues you just spoke about. How do you perceive these changes impacting the field of kinesiology? Do I have a volunteer?
Sure, I'll go ahead and go. Sure, I'll go ahead and go first. I think the biggest thing, and then I was having this conversation with a friend of mine, Karen Goodrow, a few minutes ago about Generation Z. And there's a lot to be said. We do this every few years. We talk about what the next generation of college students want, what they need, and we sometimes forget the fact that it's not just Generation Z. There are very sociological elements that go along with these particular groups as well. And figuring out ways to do programs that take into account their life and lived experiences. Because I think one of the things that we've sort of underrated is the fact that students now, their community, depending on what research you read, is primarily coming through social media. And that can be a good thing and a bad thing, because we recognize that social media influencers are not always right. In fact, they are incentivized to be wrong a lot. So the question is what do we do in our particular programs? And I think one of the things that we can start doing is looking at placemaking types of scenarios. So placemaking, for some of you who know about it, it's usually how cities go about, when you have diverse people into a city, making areas for them to be safe to express themselves. And I think what we're seeing right now in many universities is that we've gone from students having opportunities to be vocal and active on campus to those things being, first of all, restricted because universities are afraid of protest. And then second of all, they don't know what to do with the current set of students that they're having come to their campus, because everything is about student success and retention and all these different things. And they're not even listening to the students when they're saying, here are the things that we actually want. Last point on this in terms of inclusiveness as well, IPAP programs that some of you may have had or have been a part of. We talk about physical activity, we talk about health, we talk about mental health, and there has been a stark decline in those types of programs that are going on campus. And some of us will keep in mind that some of the way that you learn about people for the first time is through sports classes, through wellness classes. When you meet people for the first time and you sort of break those particular barriers down, or at least get us an opportunity to meet people you wouldn't necessarily know, that's one piece, I think, of this whole equation that we could probably impact tomorrow in some respects. And I'll pass it over.
Sure, so if you missed it, you missed it. There were 5 students here. They were amazing. The resilience, the tenacity, the strength of these 5 students who all chose the major of kinesiology gave me hope for the future. I already had it, but man, they were amazing, and I wish they were in the room. I'm going to stalk them forever until they come to Indiana University of Bloomington. For those of you in the room, that was my card. We have scholarships. They're amazing. And so I'm hopeful. And I also might be biased or jaded because I'm going to shout out my two department chairs, Mark Rotell and Ellen Evans. Ellen's only been my department chair for 7 months. Mark was my department chair, I don't know, for a really long time, like a couple decades. We're old. And we believe in it. We're strong. We recruit. We have credit hour generation. We have revenue generation. We're supporting our institution with the students who want to come study with us and the credits that they're willing, or their parents are willing to pay for. We matter. Kinesiology matters. We're important. We're changing lives. We're diverse. And I don't mean like in terms of race or gender or sex or country of origin. We're diverse in terms of our discipline. Kinesiology is such a diverse discipline, and so many different people can see themselves in our discipline, and they can see themselves in us. And so I feel really confident in this ever-changing world that we're true to ourselves, we're true to health, we're true to physical activity. We know it's important. We know every single human needs to do it. From the time that they're 6 months old until the time that they're dead. But you know, I'm not going to put an age on that. But kids, I keep hearing these stories of people who are 102, 109, and they're still active because we all need activity. And it comes, so some of us are, not me, but some of you are biomechanists. Some of you are exercise physiologists. Some of us are physical activity researchers. We're so diverse within our discipline, and students, like the ones we saw on the stage this afternoon, see themselves in us. They want us. They want to learn from us. They want our attention. We're giving it to them. We make the difference. Those people who are physical educators in elementary, junior high, and high school connect with students in ways that none of the other teachers can. Those healthcare providers who are athletic trainers and physical therapists connect with young people with injuries in ways that no other medical provider can. And they come to us because they understand, I am not worried about our profession at all. We just keep being who we are and doing what we do, and we're going to be just fine. But we have to be true to ourselves.
Thank you. So I'm hearing that, you know, we face challenges, but we may be well positioned to respond to some of the challenges in the competitive university environment. Our curriculum's attractive, but there's things happening out there. We're seeing at my university, we're currently seeing the elimination of our physical education program. Many of you have experienced that, and you know, we lament that because that's a pathway to disseminate knowledge about movement broadly to the public, and there's no mechanism like it. We're seeing things like health science majors kind of take away some of the pre-physical therapy type of students who we've lived off of in terms of enrollment. So there's challenges out there. One issue that stands out regarding social justice and equity is representation. There's a need for diversity to be represented in kinesiology curriculum and scholarship, yet we do not seem to have a critical mass of diversity on our faculty or in leadership positions. My question to you is, what are some things department leaders can consider to ensure inclusive excellence despite the lack of representation in our units?
I'll start. Because our president made a really brave move as she came. She came from Kennesaw State University, ironically, and she made a really brave move that at our university, the university will pay the salaries of underrepresented minority faculty if we can recruit them. And depending on the campus, what we get is really different. But on the campus where I work, we get 75% of their salary in perpetuity. And so she put her money, like literally where her mouth is, because we can now go out and recruit faculty and say, we can pay you more money. Because only 25% of your salary is coming from our budget, everything else is coming from the university. And you know, there's like a little bit of, like, where does that money really come from? And eventually it does actually come from schools, but it's okay. And Dean Bob Monday can tell you about that. But the thing is, we have gone out and in the last 3 years recruited 54 faculty members, and more than 60% are underrepresented minorities. She put her money where her mouth was. And I think that's what needs to happen, is that leaders of universities have to say this, but then people like us who are provosts and deans and department chairs have to say, we're gonna go find those people. Because we're not moving. You're comfortable where you are, he's comfortable where he is, I'm comfortable where I am. But I moved. And after 21 years, I moved. Because leaders go out and say, I'm gonna go get these people. The challenge is, and Mary's like giving me like bullet eyes. She's laughing because she knows. We got 2 Auburn faculty. I know, sorry. It's like, not really. And so the challenge is we've got to start early. We've got to train early people so that we're not all fighting against each other. We're not fighting ourselves for our own talented faculty members. And also, it is really important for people who are not underrepresented minorities, for people who are not women, to understand it's important for everybody to work in our discipline. And that, you know, I keep going back to that panel, and thank you for whoever decided to put together the panel of students, was so powerful in letting us know how we train the next generation. And we shouldn't have to fight each other for talented future faculty. We should be talking to one another about how to train talented future faculty while supporting people to be successful where they are.
Yeah, I was just about to add, because that's very succinct, very great. I just think also, you know, a lot of it has to do with starting at the grassroots levels. And how many times do we actually go into high schools, for instance, and create kinesiology clubs, all right? When we have like conferences like Shape America, and I've been on them for this for years, it's like when we have a conference in a major city, what are we doing in terms of outreach so that people can see some of the things that we're doing? In terms of normalizing what happens in kinesiology so that they may think, okay, well, this is a career. One of the things that we'll probably talk about as well at some point is just curriculum and what we're presenting in classes. And that's a very big thing in terms of recruitment. There's some students that will change majors, for instance, just because, and I've had this conversation with them, like, you know, we give them a textbook, or we, you know, people look through slides, they don't see anybody that looks like them. There's no way they can connect. They don't see these things as reality, so they end up switching majors and doing something completely different. Or they say to themselves, yeah, you know, maybe I'll come back to this in a master's program. And then other things, it says, well, I have a funding issue. Like, you know, how am I going to be able to pay for university, pay for schools? Creating opportunities to work in communities as well, where they, again, see what we're sort of doing here in terms of recruiting people. So, you know, I think sometimes we have to kind of start a little bit lower as well in terms of like meeting some of our students where they are. So, yeah.
Thank you. I want to build on that representation question. It's important. See if I can kind of bring this into a question. I'm one who went through K-12 education without ever having a person of color as a teacher. and went through undergraduate education without having a person of color as a teacher. And the first kinesiology scholar, I don't know if he knows this, that I saw was Brian Colt giving a guest lecture at Purdue. And I remember Tom saying something about, well, what do you want to do with your research? I'm like, I don't know, he seemed cool, I'll do it. I'll try that, whatever it is, you know. And, you know, but there's a level of impact that representation can have. And so I want to ask a question about what that's like to be where you are, a Fulbright scholar, a full professor who's navigated challenges, been successful, an executive associate dean at an R1 university. These are impressive credentials. But yet I know you've internalized some difficult experiences. You've overcome some things. I commend you for that. But I would ask, can you share something with us? What is it like to be you, a black man, full professor, a black woman, professor, associate dean, a leader? What is that like that we might not understand? Can I ask that question?
You want me to start first?
Please.
Because I think you guys a lot, because we work together. Oh my goodness gracious. We'll have some time afterwards as well. Bring most of my drink. Could you imagine just being in a class every day when somebody's watching you? I felt like I've been on since I graduated. I graduated at age 28 of UGA. And I felt like literally every day that people are watching everything that you do. Now, there's a lot of different experience with that. Currently where I'm at right now, being a full professor, I am the only, we have 3 black men in a school of 400. The other 2 of those black men are lecturers, one's a part-timer, I'm the only full professor. So anything that happens, whether I want to be in it or not, I'm in it. Some of you may have seen me on the phone a couple of times as we've been doing some sessions and stuff here, having some very verbose conversations where you're just like, what's wrong with this particular guy? Well, what's wrong is 9 times out of 10, I'm talking to someone who is literally in the middle of asking themselves whether they still want to do this job or not because of the types of pressure that they're under. These are people of color. And, you know, you're sitting there and you're trying to tell them how to manage something where you've dealt with sort of the same experiences, but the game has sort of changed from even when I graduated and got my doctorate in terms of what the expectations are for new people coming out in the field. Other pieces, always feeling like whenever there's a EDI level type of piece, people ask you how you feel about it. And sometimes you're just like, yeah, I don't really want to have a feeling about it. Do I have to talk about this once again? Because I think one thing we can all appreciate as well, yes, I do social justice work, I do EDI work, but it's not the only thing that I do. And it's sometimes very annoying to have those types of conversations with deans who just sometimes are very transactional. They want to put you out there literally to have a conversation to sort of claim and put the fires out, right? Oh, wow. Yeah, I mean, it's an everyday thing of balancing, and I've had to make sure for myself that I protect my space and protect my time. And I will leave with this. I was a department chair during COVID. So 2020, that's when I started. When COVID hit, I was tapped being interim department chair, and I said to myself at the time, that this is the time to go ahead and try it. And I'm telling you, I spent 28 months in that job, and I felt like it was 10 years. Because of just, and some of you have been at, it's just so much, and it was so much from students, it was so much from faculty, it was so much in terms of people feeling like they needed to have an answer for everything. And I still deal with that now, even as a full professor. It's just, I look at kind of where I'm at right now, and I'm like, you know, statistically, you look at statistically how many black men made it to this point. And you're just going, wow, yeah, it's a lot. So I'll stop. Yeah.
Dear department chairs, you have the hardest job at any university anywhere. Thank you for being department chairs.
Here, here.
So So my funny story, so Brian is like a dear, beloved friend. We are very close. And when we worked at the same institution, we would go away from our building and huddle and talk about whatever. It could have been my kids, it could have been his mom or his grandparents. We would talk about all kinds of stuff, related to work, not related to work, and it would raise eyebrows. So I had been at the university for a while, and I would say, hey, have you met my little brother, Brian? He's an assistant professor in our department. And they would be like, he's your brother? I'm like, yeah, we have the same mom. And they would be like, she must be so proud. And we would say, oh, she is. And nobody ever questioned it. And sorry, we just did it to Kim last night. We are not related. But how we could go huddle in a corner is just to make people feel like, you know, of course, these two talented Black people have to be from the same family, because of course not could these people not be related. And they just accepted it. And so there are a lot of people to this day who think that Brian and I have the same mother. We do not. My mom was the Dean of Students for Grand Valley State College, which is now Grand Valley State University. I grew up as the daughter of an academician. She took me everywhere. She took me to class before she was a dean. When she was a dean, she took me to her office. I saw a fist pump. Everybody knows Allentown, Michigan smells like manure. I was like, what's that smell, Mom? City girl. She was like, oh, that's how they fertilize the grass. So that's so interesting. It smells really bad. And I would go to class with her. I would go to her office. I would see students go in, being in peril. I would see students come out, and whatever was wrong, she managed to fix it. And I was like, I want to do that. I don't know what it is that you do, but that's what I want to do. And I remember before that, I was 7 years old and my mom got her PhD. She was the first Black woman to get her PhD from Northern Illinois University. And she taught me I could do it. So I never felt like I was the only one because I had my mom. And I still have her. Like, she's not dead, she's still here. She talks to me, like we talk every day. She tells me like what I'm doing right, what I'm doing wrong. She's still an administrator and she's a clinical psychologist, which is scary. And she like talks to me. So I never, ever, ever felt alone in this position. Not ever. I have my mom. She was my mom. She still is my mom. And so what I think is I've got to be the mom. So I've got 4 children of my own. They're all adults. I've got 2 grandchildren of my own. I've got a student who, thank you, Rafael Bahamande, brought her to me. She's my bonus daughter, and I have a bonus grandson from her. I'm the mom. I love it. I love being a mother. It's like better than being an educator. It's better than being a researcher because people believe in you blindly. And it's great. And that's what I want to be for any young person who wants to do this. Like, you can do it. My mom showed me I could do it. I want to show them you can do it. I want to be there for them, and they can do it. And so what it means to me is everything. It means everything, because that's how it gets done. If you can see it, you can be it. It's my whole life, and I hope that the people behind me see it's your whole life, to be the person that you say to someone who is like you or isn't like you or looks like you, you can do this too. It means everything, and so I work really hard every day because it means everything for the people who can see. I have to be really visible so that they can see me and they can see it and be it.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. We're better off because of people like you of various identities making themselves available to be role models, like you described. I thought about that this morning when the topic came up around, how do you reward EDI? Is it in tenure and promotion? Is it not? How does it fit in? And one thing that stands out about the work you've done is you put effort into it, and it's taxing. but it has an impact. And generally, in higher ed, we reward things that require effort and have an impact. So I think that's worth reflecting on. We have some time left, but I want to make sure I give a chance for the audience to ask questions if you have some. So if anyone wants to raise their hand, I'm going to kind of pause and invite some questions from you all. Oh, I learned with Zoom. I learned you got to give a good pause. Zoom taught us that, so I think Tim Gavin's going to ask a question.
Very good.
Thank you, everyone. Tim Gavin, Purdue, and I don't really have a question, but I want to echo something that Nicole said. Nicole and I have worked together, and very fortunate to call her my friend. But I think it's upon each and every one of us to think about how we build the pipeline. It's not how do we recruit the people to be in our faculty jobs. It's how do we promote students to be in our undergraduate programs, to be in our graduate programs, who will be the faculty we will all be so proud of. That's what really, I think we should all, for me, is such an important message, is to be conscious of that. It's more being cognizant of what we're doing and how we're doing it.
Thanks, Tim. That's a good one.
I think part of the challenge I'm having is understanding whether or not to fully embrace and just be the type of individual in academics that's going to just say, you know what, even if DEI is somewhat of a negative term now, that's okay. We're going to embrace it. We're going to own it as being a positive. Or do we label it belonging? Because belonging is safer. Belonging is more welcoming to those who are uncomfortable with DEI. That we can embrace belonging because it feels better. And it doesn't actually discuss the issue that is disparity and disinvestment and discrimination and racism and ageism, all the other isms and intersectionality, what we know of. But if we call it belonging, we feel better. So I'm curious how we approach this in states that are now, saying you can't use those terms.
I'm going to go first because Brian will have a better answer. So it's not either or, it's both. These are not, you don't have to choose between belonging and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it brings me back to a comment that I said before, that I feel a responsibility to whiten it. Because, we don't do any of this without white people. Honestly, like, we were slaves. I'm a descendant of slaves. And if not for some white person who decided to free the slaves, I'd still be a slave. We don't do any of this without white people. And so shame on anybody who says we don't need you, because we do. And so I feel a responsibility to make everyone feel like they belong. I also am committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so it's not an either or. It's all really important. But I talked about my grad student who said, what can I do? I'm a white man on the south side of Indianapolis. I never knew a black person before I met you. I need him. I need him to speak up and to include and to make people feel like they belong, but also to embrace DEI. We need to do it. Y'all need to do it. Everybody needs to do it. And it's not an either or.
Yeah, I would just add, and one of the things I've been very intentional about in working with other people who are trying to figure out how this works in this crazy space is facts. Something that people are we're just very loose with facts right now.
And some of the conversations I'm having with other administrators, other professors, particularly tenured full professors who have a heck of a amount of power in these situations that sometimes we forget that we have and we don't use, is getting people to talk about policy, getting people to talk about statistical facts when we're looking at how to help people, right? So for instance, people will sort of shift the conversation from equity, and they will try to say, well, we're going to help rural people. And that actually, in my neck of the woods, doesn't do any good there, because rural is a connotation for really poor white people, and they don't recognize the fact that there's a whole bunch of people who are considered rural in the United States, in particular in the South. So thinking about things such as, okay, so we're going to be going to get grants. We're just going to talk about belonging. When we're putting these things together, we're putting these resource teams together who have expertise. If we are trying to work to get the best outcome, number one, but the best funding and the most amount of successful people, can we really be in a situation where we're just talking about just belonging, right? Like, at the end of the day, and it's not easy, so let's just get that straight. But I do think some of this is, I don't want to minimize it. I think some of this is a phase, because we keep just playing around with these terms. And I think at some point, people are going to figure out the fact that you cannot have a society that is this incredibly diverse, with the amount of young people coming into this situation and saying that you want to help people, and then at the end of the day, not acknowledge that structural inequalities and racism exist. So I challenge everybody in here, because I go through this exercise every day, and it's not just with Black people. I look at these things and I sit there and say to myself, what are the facts here versus what is the spin? And I think if we start getting faculty to lean more into that, and our students see that and develop better support systems for these things, we can create more transformative programs, right? So again, not the end all be all, but I think that's something that sort of helps is sort of focusing on these facts.
I wanted to respond to something that Cole said, and that was that we're in competition and that we're kind of fighting and vying for each other's, the faculty that really represent diversity within our units. And I want to say that I'm pretty optimistic in that, but I don't see it that way. And I know that that faculty can leave units and go somewhere else. You guys have left and gone somewhere else. Actually, I left and went somewhere else over the years. But there's plenty of really great talent out there. And I'll go back to what Tim said in terms of pipeline. I mean, we started a pipeline 15 years ago, and we got plenty of students coming through our program. We're producing, and actually, the demographic of this group, when I first started with AKA, when it started, it was all white. And we said then, we've got to start growing some diversity within our leadership. But there's tons of talent out there. There's lots and lots of individuals with incredible potential that can fulfill all of the needs of all of us in this room in our institutions. And so I'm real optimistic, because it's changing. It might not be as fast as we'd like to see it change sometimes, but I don't see it as even that's part of higher ed is moving on and going to different places. But what I hear oftentimes people say is, well, there's just nobody to hire. And that's not true, okay? It's absolutely not true. So there's plenty of folks out there that we can bring in to hire that meet our diversity needs. We've just got to start looking and look harder and start putting people through pipelines, people through doc programs. And we're a real attractive degree, we're an attractive area, just like you said, Nicole. Because there's nothing more important than health and performance optimization and all these different things in the real world. There are billions and gazillion-dollar businesses. So we've got a lot of opportunity, and I see this just as we're growing, and we're gonna get there.
And so I agree with you 100%, Marion. Thank you. And I will say that it is also our responsibility to not just recruit them, but to retain them. And to make sure that we're making an environment, and I'm at a research one institution, our faculty have so many contingencies that they have to meet in order to get what we offer them in terms of their offer letter, what we offer them for packages. There's so many contingencies. And we have to create an environment that they feel safe. Which I think is kind of sad, but true, hired our first Native faculty member. In the history of our school, there's never been a Native faculty member before last year, or this year. We hired her in August. And how do I make sure she feels safe and supported? I think I'm really good at this, but I've had conversations with her and I'm like, not sure. This is new. It's new. And so, where she's new to me, you might hire your very first Latinx faculty member. You might hire your very first Black faculty member. You might hire your very first fill in the blank, not white American faculty member. And one size doesn't fit all. And I really worry at Indiana University Bloomington how to make sure they feel safe and protected, but they still have to produce. Because let's face it, like, you don't get tenure and promotion unless you work your butt off. And so they still have to work really hard. They still have to be awesome and do all of these things that feel impossible, but possible because we've all done it. And we've got to support them. And so it's not just going and finding them, because you're right, Mary, they are out there. But then they get to this like really stressful, awful situation. I told our provost last semester, I'm worried about the faculty. I'm new. I have never experienced the level of anxiety that faculty have today. I've never experienced it. I'm worried about them. And I don't know if it's because of the world we live in. I don't know if it's because we're a really high performing school and people have to have external funding and it's expected and it's competitive and you have to be like this ridiculous genius in order to be successful. But I'm worried. And so we have to make them feel safe. And so it's not just recruiting them. It's recruiting them, retaining them, and helping them feel very safe and supported while they do the impossible. It's inclusive excellence.
So I think we're near time, and we'll ask a closing question to allow you to comment on. And I think it's fitting to think about inclusive excellence and student success, particularly after the panel we had here today. And someone mentioned earlier the growth of minority-serving institutions, Hispanic-serving institutions, the demographic trends, and so on. So everybody in here is trying to recruit those 5 students, myself included, to their university. And she's offering the whole package, and so, we can recruit them and admit them, but what if they come to your university? Do you have a context that can receive them?
Yes.
And so that's a question I wonder what you think about in terms of this growing diversity that we're seeing taking place, and they're coming to our campus. If we're going to have a kinesiology department in the future, it's going to be a diverse department. How are we going to have a context that can welcome those students and ensure their success?
I think the biggest thing, and I just speak from this experience of the past few years, the biggest thing I think we've done is try to really provide more program options. I mean, I think we talked a little bit about earlier, our physical education program was on the decline, and we were given the challenge to sort of expand sort of the tracks, and what we essentially did was create a youth physical activity leadership track. Because we started to recognize that some of the students who were coming in didn't necessarily all want to work just in schools. They wanted to work in faith-based programs, they wanted to work in recreational programs. Some of them even wanted to own their own companies.
capabilities and sort of get another degree. So that was one of the things that we sort of did to sort of expand some pieces in terms of options. I would probably say the biggest thing that I've seen in terms of changing some of the stuff that we've done has been study abroad. And figuring out ways to make study abroad affordable, realistic, and I think we've already talked about this here. I used to work at IUPUI, now IUI. The first few years I was there, we did a study abroad program in Africa, and it was okay, but it needed to be better because it was very expensive. And those were some lessons that I sort of learned when I left IUPUI and went to Kennesaw State, was trying to figure out how can we make study abroad in a situation where we're seeing on a global basis people wanting to be more isolationist. How do we get students into spots where they can change the community? So we started looking at the Dominican Republic because it was just a lot cheaper and we could get funders to kind of help us with those programs. And for that particular program, we've seen a significant amount of students go with us every May, and they go down there, they work in public health, they work in kinesiology. Some of the things they do over the course of 10 days is amazing in terms of how they change the way that they're thinking. And the students want that. They want more opportunities to be involved in the community and take something back and feel like they've done something, right? So I think those are some avenues to sort of think about. It's like, how can we take existing programs, expand them? How can we get students to think more outside of the box and make it more cost effective for them and sort of fit into some of their work-life schedules as well?
It's a great answer, Ryan. I'm going to give a little bit more in my feelings answer because I still live in Indianapolis. I drive to Bloomington almost every day. It's an hour and 5 minutes, 46 miles from my garage to my parking spot. And I have to drive through Martinsville, Indiana. And so those of us from Indiana know that's a hotbed of the KKK. And I drive through there every day. I got stopped for speeding once. I was speeding, so I should have gotten stopped. And people were like, "Didn't you argue with the police officer?" I was like, "Are you kidding me right now? I just didn't want to go to jail." And I don't speed through Martinsville ever anymore. If I'm going to be late, I'm going to be late. But I try to leave on time because I don't want to end up in the jail in Martinsville. I would. And I have that every day driving to work and every day driving home. Why do I do it? Because I also know I could work from home most days. Nobody would complain. But I don't want to work from home. I want to be with my colleagues in Bloomington. I'm safe in Bloomington. I know it. I know my colleagues love me, and I can tell you so many stories about how safe and welcome I feel in Bloomington. And I've only been there 7 months, and I've got Tim, who's been my friend for a really long time, and I can rely on him for everything. Raphael is like my brother, Mark is like my brother, we really love each other. We've been together for almost 3 decades. So of course, either we're gonna love each other or not speak. And so we love each other. But I've met these new colleagues in Bloomington who have embraced me so strongly and so firmly and so lovingly that I want to go to Bloomington, even though I have to drive through Martinsville. I'm going to go every day. I'm going to see them. I'm going to be with them. And this is what we have to do for our students. We want to embrace them so strongly and lovingly that they want to be with us. And the only way we can do that is if we do it for each other. We gotta do it for each other. We've gotta make each other feel like you matter. Your teaching matters. Your research matters. Your service matters. Your presence matters. Your hard work matters. Every day. I love you. You love me. We love each other. We love our students. We're not doing this for the money because none of us gets paid enough to do what we do. We're doing it because we love it and we love each other. And that's the answer. And so while our programs matter, our curriculum matters, our research matters, all that stuff does really matter. It's important, we have to do it. Policy matters, programs matter, but people matter the most. And if we don't care about each other, we can't welcome our students. We have to welcome each other. We've got to be together. We've got to love each other. We've got to tell each other, whatever you do, even if I don't understand it, it's important. And you matter to me. And then our students matter to us. And we're going to make our university a wonderful place. That's what we have to do.
Brian, Cole, thank you. This was fantastic, thought-provoking. I think I can say that we all took something from this, and I haven't even debriefed with everyone, so this was impactful. It was fun for me to have this conversation, and we'll end this part, but it shall continue, I hope. Thank you.
Thank you for being brave enough to sit between the two crazy.
Absolutely.